You just call the police for me. You telling me it's a case of emergency. Jaman to rubber just jump down me. Them going on me pocket, take out me money. Them go around me neck, take with me jewelry. They go up on me finger, take with me ring.
Yes, Balu.
You just call the police for me. The gun with them to be with is a M3. You just call the police for me. No matter if them come from us, me already.
Yes, Scratch Famous, I see you. Just let some people come in. Give us a couple of minutes and we'll start this session off. Alright, Skanking Star, I see you. I see you. Yes, Miss Sharif. Alright. John Wayne. With the one John Way. Yes, people. Rock and come in right now. Big up Bass Maya in the place. Skanking Star. The whole Massman crew tuned in right now. Alright guys, welcome to the third edition of Soundclash 101. This is the final edition of this series of talks. We've been talking about Soundclash. It's been a sort of like a brief intro to the culture, which is Soundclash. It's such an integral part of reggae music and sound system in general, but for some reason over the years has become very niche. So I hope you guys have enjoyed the previous two talks. We had Mattia from Warrior Sound in Germany and Sultan from Herbalize It in Holland on our first session. And then of course we had Taru, Delhi Sultanate from Bass Foundation Roots yesterday, which was a wicked session. Today I am super happy and super excited to have a very special guest. His sound, Deadly Dragon Sound, is one of the biggest sounds out of New York City. Been an ever-present in the scene for many, many years. He's had a record store for, I think the store itself, the physical store, lasted for over 10 years. And now he still sells records online. So it's really a big name, Deadly Dragon Sound, in the business. Really been a mainstay of the New York City scene. And we're super excited to have Scratch Famous with us this evening. He has moved to Japan, so we kind of had to just switch the timings from what we had initially scheduled. That's why you can see it's a little earlier today. But yeah, I'm going to get him on without further ado because he is waiting to jump on this and we're super excited to have him. Let's see if we can get him on this. Just want to big up everyone who's tuned in right now. Big up people from all around the world. I know all you guys are listening. All you Soundclash fans. All you reggae music lovers. Let's see what's going on. Uh-huh. All right, Jeremy, try and accept the request. I did accept you into the... Or maybe send it again. Maybe you should exit and then come back into the live session and send me the request again. because it seems that you're not being able to enter. But yeah, just so you guys are aware, we're doing this basically because Delhi Sultanate Base Foundation Roots is competing in the World Quarantine Clash, which is a sound clash, an online sound clash. I know right now we got to do all types of things differently, and sound clash in an environment like this is something very unique. So yeah, it's super exciting that Delhi Sultanate is representing India. Okay, looks like we have Scratch Famous live and direct out of Japan.
Yes, indeed.
Loud and clear, you can hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you like brilliant. No problem,
right.
like a bell.
Sweet. All right, cool. Well, thanks for joining us firstly on this. It's really it's a pleasure to have you on this little panel that we created.
Oh, thank you very much, and no worries about the timing. It's kind of interesting, all this 12 hours ahead, 15 like we're going through space and time together for the purpose of Soundclash culture, so I appreciate it.
For sure. Cool. So I think, Jeremy, what really, why we decided would be interesting for the massive to really hear some thoughts from you. It's just because for the last couple of days, we got a nice little European perspective from Mattia and Sultan. We obviously got Delhi Sultanate's perspective, from India and kind of what it means to him and how he's been anticipating this clash. But I think from you, what would be really nice is to get a flavor of maybe the history, because, you're from New York, and New York being, a reggae music capital and a sound clash capital of the world, you've obviously been around that culture for so many years. So maybe from you, it would be nice to get a little historical perspective, and maybe you can start by just in layman's terms, because there are a lot of people logged in right now who might not know exactly what a sound clash is. So maybe you could just start by, really simply and succinctly just telling us what is a sound clash, and then maybe just go a little bit into the origins, or at least how it kind of came about, maybe briefly,
I mean, sound clash is, in the simplest terms, a contest between two sound systems to see who's the wickedest sound, who plays the wickedest. And really, you got to think of it as, the history of it was basically, it was a poor people's art form. In Jamaica, not everyone could afford a stereo. Not everyone, were able to sit around with records in their own homes. So, this is in the 50s. People would gather together, build speakers outside of, a food shop, outside of a liquor store to bring people's attention, and crowds would kind of gather, and that's how people got to listen to their music. And as that kind of started to build up, people started to compete, because it's a natural thing, you got to be the loudest sound on the block. And that sound originally started coming from people building actual speakers whose sound could play louder than the others, whose sound system, the physical sound system, could be clearer than the next. And it went on into records. And, the most famous example was Sir Coxsone Dodd and Duke Reed in Jamaica. They're the two foundation, not just sound system operators. There were earlier sound systems, but they're, we can read them as the most important sound system owners at the time. And they also became the foundation of the Jamaican recording industry. And the two of them would go back and forth and have sessions. And Coxsone was very famous because he would go cut sugarcane and go to America, and he would bring back records from each of his journeys, and he would scratch off the labels of those records that he brought, and he would name them his own names. One would be called Coxsone's Hop or something, and he had a DJ with him, King Stitt, who would intro those records and talk over them. And those records that were scratched off, no one knew who they were, and most of them were kind of jump blues from New Orleans, and but no one knew the real names of those records. And he would and Duke Reed would battle, and eventually Prince Buster would battle. But if someone wants to know an early explanation of the what Soundclash was and what it came from, I heard a story once where Coxon had been playing these records that no one else had any idea, and one morning Duke Reed announced by his liquor store that night he was going to play all of Coxon's tunes. He had found them all, he had discovered what they were, and this was going to happen. So Coxon got all vexed and worried and went to see Duke Reed that night, and the first tune he played was the original Coxon's Hop, the real tune. And basically Coxon had been busted out, and apparently Coxon fainted right there and passed out. That was it. That was the first, he had been, in Soundclash terms, completely killed, and it so killed that he actually fainted. And that was the beginning of Soundclash. And it continued on, and throughout Jamaica, this sounds got more powerful. There became, bigger sound systems, bigger speakers built, amplifiers built. All the important people in the recording industry were becoming involved. And most importantly, during the 60s, a real recording industry had started. And one of the things that was important with this recording industry is that you had to have somewhere they would record in a big studio and voice in another studio. And the studio where they were voicing and mixing records was King Tubby's. And King Tubby's would cut acetates there, so he had all the tapes. So he was the guy that you would go to, and you would get pre-release acetate, dub mixes of big songs. So all the sound system operators would go to him to get these pre-release records, and that became the first kind of dub plates. They were specials, special mixes of popular tunes that you could play just an instrumental version. And a very famous story is that King Tubby, who had his own sound system, when he first got an echo machine, he played a dub with echo to, I think it was a Pat Kelly tune, and people went so crazy in Jamaica that they began to tear down the fences. People were, same thing, passing out because the amazement of being able to hear that. And gradually, throughout the 70s, and there was a brief time where kind of Soundclash kind of quieted down in Jamaica because of the war that was going on, the Civil War. And eventually, during the later part of the 70s, it kind of started to come back, and real sound systems and dancehall started to play again. And the primary thing in terms of that, in terms of Clash, were playing acetates, and you would have live artists, rub-a-dub sound system, and they would represent your sound. Volcano had Little John, different people, and a Clash would be essentially someone playing acetates and DJs going against another sound, and whoever won by people, it was the people's response would be the winner.
So it was basically a setup where a sound would be invited by another sound to bring their sound into the same, hall or area and
lawn
and clash, or how would the setup have been back in the late?
The setup
70s?
would be at two distinct sound systems. A lot of times sounds would play alone, but when you had a clash, the two sounds would bring their own sound system. So it wasn't just the records and the artist; it was records, artist, mixer, and actual sound system.
So this format of a sound clash, you would say, started in the late 70s or so?
Yeah.
So they would bring the two sounds. Each sound would bring a bunch of MCs to kind of customize lyrics about their sound, and of course the operators and the selectors and things like that. So that was...
More importantly, it wasn't just talking about the sound system. They were also talking about, things that went on during, in Jamaica. They were talking about daily experiences, humor, everything came up. So it wasn't just saying a sound name. They were there as entertainers.
Right, that's what I was saying. So it's more about entertainment, not necessarily just bigging up a sound and kind of an ego thing. It was more the MCs were there to entertain.
And ego thing. I mean, definitely killing was part of this. You definitely you wanted to murder so and so. Generally, with your entertainment, that they would pack up their sound and go.
And the winner was always decided by audience.
By
votes?
Audience. There are no rules. There are no judges. You just knew who was going to win.
Okay, I mean, it was a combination of whose sound was better, who entertained the crowd better, who played the bigger songs. I
Yeah,
guess a
and
combination of everything.
whose supporter like who had the most supporters, and
Right.
sometimes this didn't go well. You know, other
Hmm.
some sounds had some like roughneck supporters who would come and sabotage the next sound, kick in their speakers, intimidate the other sound. So it definitely there were no rules to the war at that time.
Right. Okay. So that was sort of late 70s, early 80s.
Early 80s,
And
like, and throughout the 80s. I mean, this continued on.
and then kind of what's the next stage of Soundclash, because I mean, what happened? Like, how did it start getting global, maybe, or how did the concept of clashing without sound systems start? How did recorded dub plates start rather than live dub plates? I mean, what was the process of that sort of
Well,
transition?
it was kind of a two-step process. I mean, a lot of people would say that. I mean, you have to imagine during this time, you're having Jamaicans are really moving globally. You already have a large Jamaican presence in England, but
Yeah.
during the 80s, especially, Jamaicans are late 70s, 80s. Jamaicans are going to New York. And in massive numbers. They had already been in Toronto and New York throughout the 70s, but now real exodus is going to Miami, going everywhere, within the 50 states, and in a lot of ways too. So tapes are going back and forth from Jamaica all over the world of Soundclash, and people are hearing what's going on, and sound systems are starting to pop up all over the globe within Jamaican communities. And in England, you have sound reaching outside of just Jamaican audience. It's starting to build up real power amongst UK youth that had now had a decade more than almost any other country in terms of a Jamaican presence, and they're building their own thing.
Hmm.
But when it comes to Soundclash itself, the next step was really, a lot of people would say it was Stone Love was the first sound who started playing two turntables, and it was kind of uptown style. Typically in the ghetto sounds, Volcano, Youth Men Promotion, it was one turntable and you had a
Right.
live audience. And Stone Love came from an uptown area and came downtown to the ghetto, and they had a more kind of fluid, flashy style, two turntables, mixer. And while other people had recorded dub plates that called the sound's name instead of having live people, Stone Love was really more dependent on recorded dub plates, where they recorded the artist on dub plate calling a sound system name and customizing lyrics of big songs toward Stone Love. And their sound system itself is also wicked. And there was a famous clash where Stone Love went against, I believe it was Jammy, and their sound was just overpowered Jammy, and it was a major event for Stone Love, and it really cemented their name in Jamaica, famously with John Holt's "Police and Helicopter" as was the big tune. But that style then became, for I think for economic reasons. You got to think that going to a sound clash and having 20 people up on stage that you had to pay at the end of the day sometimes could get pricey for a sound system operator. So instead, recording those acetates and playing them at a sound clash might have been a more viable option. You could carry them. You didn't have to. You could play them each time rather than having to pay artists live. Now, the sad part of that to me is that I also think that moment brought down the lyrical dexterity of Jamaican artists in a lot of ways, because so many of those artists had grown up in the dance hall. When you look at, even going back as far as, Bounty, Ninja Man, like those artists grew up in a live dance hall setting where you had to learn to perform live. And their
Absolutely.
lyrical dexterity and their ability to entertain people, not to mention, like Charlie Chaplin and Brigadier Jerry and all the kind of foundation artists that
Yeah.
were able to run a dance hall, or someone like Ranking Joe, who you could give a microphone to, and he could literally entertain the crowd from sun up to sundown
Hours.
and
Yeah.
never repeat a lyric.
Yeah.
And for the next 30 years, I think that it was an unfortunate thing. A lot of younger artists could really learn from that experience and gain a better sense of how to interact with an audience, especially live, and also just in terms of developing lyrics.
For sure. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that that fluidity and that spontaneity, is so creative. And when you don't have that environment, the output is also different. And I think you can see that now in the music that's coming out of Jamaica, for sure. So let's just go back to Stone Love for a second. So you would say Stone Love was the first ones. Were the first sounds who kind of started recording dub plates, playing with two turntables? Is that...
Well, they were the first. I mean, other people had recorded dub plates. Inner City, definitely, one of the first all dub plate sound systems playing out there. But Stone Love was the first to kind of bring the two turntable style and kind of bring juggling in a way that we would think of as modern rounds in the Soundclash. That they kind of and Rory's vocals were so, the way he controlled the mic and the way that he mixed tunes became, I think, a really what a lot of modern sound systems kind of followed.
For sure. So I guess that led into an era where you were not just traveling around Jamaica with your recorded dubs, but you could actually travel around the world, right?
Absolutely. I think, in New York, it was where I grew up. You had, starting in the 80s, you had a lot of sound systems that were growing up and developing. And people were having such a play with Jamaica, between Jamaica and New York, because every day someone was landing from in JFK or LaGuardia Airport from Jamaica with a bag full of tapes of, exactly what was going on 2 days ago. And all the youth that had come to New York would hear those 3 days after a session in Jamaica, and immediately they would want to respond. And there was a raft of really important sound systems in the late 80s that started developing, and a lot of it, for better or for worse, there was a lot of drug money at that time. And drug money has a lot of bad elements to it, but one of the good elements is that people need to launder drug money. And one of the great places to do that is with music and the music business. So Jamaica exploded in terms of record labels, record stores, sound systems, and there was just a bunch of people who had money and would. And I'm not saying that the sound systems themselves were drug dealers, but drug dealers would give them money to help buy equipment and stuff like that. And you had to me, the great sound systems of that early New York time. You had, of course, Downbeat the Ruler, who had come, and Downbeat played up in the Bronx, and Downbeat had Shinehead with him, Louis Ranking with him as his MCs, and he had the great box of all the Studio One dub plates, so he could play Studio One rhythm forever. In Brooklyn, you had Mini Mart, who had Curry Don, Bobo General, Sleepy Wonder, Trevor Sparks as singer, Sluggy Ranks, and then you had Terrorist and Startone and the Vital Family, and that was had my favorite artist of all time, which is Screechy Dan, who was kind of like the great freelance operative of New York. Anytime you wanted a sound killed in New York, you would have Screechy come and play in your set, Screechy and James Bond and Red Fox, and those sessions were epic because they were absolutely just chaos personified in the best ways, like wonderfully musically, lyrically, also kind of scary and dangerous, a lot of gunplay, a lot of bad boy business at that time. But, people understood that it was still entertainment. Sounds weren't shooting each other. Their audience might have been shooting up the ceilings at Biltmore Ballroom, but it was real energy in terms of how you lyrically kill someone and how you make your sound great. And it had a free form energy that was magnificent.
No, I can imagine. I mean, that's really the beauty of the sound system. I mean, one of the things about India is right now we're kind of charting our own path, you know. So we have a couple of sound systems, and both the sounds still have a freeness to them, you know. I mean, there's still this
Absolutely.
energy of passing the microphone, people getting in a cipher, and that creativity and that electricity. You know, you can't duplicate that. I mean, that can't be replicated with anything else, really, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that that's, it actually leads to, I think that the internationalization of sound system culture has been it has done great things for Jamaican music overall and sound class culture overall. I think, there was a time period, to me at least, where things in the early 90s, things were really great. You had Addies, you had LP, you had Earth Ruler, you had Bodyguard, you had in Jamaica, you had Black Cat, you had all these great sounds that were Bass Odyssey, Kilimanjaro, all these fantastic sound systems, and the clashes were epic and wonderful, and their music was wonderful. And you can listen to tapes for days and days and hear some of the best clashes that went throughout the 90s. There turned a period, and I think I would actually say, like, it's kind of where the internet starts playing a problematic part in the culture when you stop having people having to work hard for dub plates, and people can, get them over the internet. It starts losing a vitality, and people start recording the same tunes over and over and over again. And I think that the international audience has reminded a lot of, Jamaicans and New Yorkers tunes that were forgotten, artists that were forgotten, the joy of like rub-a-dub sound in a major way, because there, like any kind of culture that happens, you have a set of things that everyone thinks they have to have. They have to have that Bounty Killer dub. They have to have those things. And if you grow up outside of that, maybe you don't think you have to have that. You heard the weird, you heard, some roots tune that struck you as that could be a wicked Soundclash tune, and you recorded that instead of just going, in a way, recording something totally familiar. And I think that always showed up. I mean, I'm sure that, the audience, in terms of Soundclash now, Clash has become, has a lot of rules now. It's not as chaotic as when I was young. And Irish and Chin created World Clash. And World Clash was kind of the codification of the Soundclash industry. And it brought together some significant, prize money. And it also brought together, round one would be this round, and had judges, and, it became a much more organized art form.
That was in the mid '90s, or when was that?
In mid '90s, it started. I think it started in '93 or '94, but by the time it really grew into itself was '99 when Mighty Crown won.
So that was the biggest Clash competition, the first big Clash competition, and the other ones kind of followed suit. You would say, like all the other.
No, I'd say it was more like a codification. It grew into itself. Okay. Like it represented order in a very unordered world, and as the '90s went on, it grew in status and it grew in power until I would say in 1999 when Mighty Crown came in, and I think coming from an outsider, they clashed against, I think it was Addies and Kilimanjaro, if I'm not right on that clash. And Mighty Crown did something which I always thought was great, which was instead of just kind of replaying all the old tunes that they had already that people had already been playing, and all the anthems that Kilimanjaro had or Addies had, anthems that everyone in a Brooklyn audience knew, they were able to kind of think like, what haven't people heard for a while? And they brought back Sancho's Chase Vampire rhythm, and they put Sprague Benz on it, and it just kind of, I remember watching the crowd, and everyone was just like, it kind of froze them for a second, like, holy shit, we forgot about that. This is like a new thing happening, and Mighty Crown totally took the Clash, and I always felt it was based on looking at it with a creative mindset instead of just trying to kind of copy what was going on around them. Because maybe they didn't have the money at that time to just cut those big artists. They had to be more creative with their thought process.
For sure. I think let's talk about that for a second. I mean, Deadly Dragon has, of course, a bunch of dub plates, but you're not a Clash sound. Like, you don't clash, right?
No, that element never interests me.
Right. So let's get the perspective of someone who, loves Clash, has dub plates, but doesn't clash. But you've attended many, many clashes, right?
Yes.
New York City, Japan, probably all over the world. So what is it as an audience member? Like, what do you look out for? What attracts you? Because I asked this to the people, to the guys who clash, clash sounds. They were like, yeah, it's the thrill of the competition. And I guess it's very much an ego thing for them. But for you, as someone who, is a Clash fan, who comes as a fan to these clashes, what do you look for? I mean, what is it that has you hooked? Why have you been watching every quarantine clash? I mean, what is it? What's the magic?
I mean, the things that excite me in general is I've heard a lot of dub plates in my life, and I've heard a lot. If I hear certain tunes played again, I just will automatically tune out of sound. Like, oh fuck, you really like that's already been done. And what excites me is when I hear something that I just didn't expect, where it shows someone's real love for the music, and I also, in that combination, real love for the music and seeing where you can take that love and turn it into a weapon. And I love that Jordan-esque thing when you hear a sound playing and you realize that they totally have it. And they have the crowd, and they have someone running from them, and there's no way to escape it. They're just going, something very bad is happening. And I love that feeling of watching someone just stumble and fall, and someone really stepping on their throats and just playing the tunes and really reading it so that their tunes aren't just being played as like a wicked tune, but it's telling a story about what's going on, and it's telling a story about the music, and it's telling a story about themselves and how they compete. And that's, like one of my favorite sound systems is Supersonic out of Germany. And Panza's a good friend of mine, but, he's a lovely person, like a really nice, sweet guy. I mean, he's like vegetarian. He likes cats. So, buy some cheese. When you watch him play tunes, he will fucking eat your throat out. He will kill you with a dub plate. There's no niceness there at all, and no sentimentality. Like, and I love that about people that are good with clashes. This is a business, and it's a business that they love, and they can really go in on it deep. And those are things that I love, and to me, Soundclash, what's important is just that, Soundclash, no matter if you're from India, if you're from Kingston, you're telling a story about Jamaican music. And Jamaican music, to me, tells a story about not just Jamaicans, but it tells a story about sufferation and about making something out of nothing. And those are the important things about music and about what we all love.
Absolutely. I think that really hit the nail on the head. You're right. It's just it's a unique form of entertainment, and the creativity can be unparalleled. And when someone gets it just right, you're like, wow, that guy got it, for sure.
Yeah.
Tell me something, Jeremy. Like, this is something which a lot of people who, they like reggae. I mean, like, for example, in India, we're now a pretty, pretty decent reggae loving community. But, the clashes that Reggae Rajahs and Delhi Sultan used to have, they kind of stopped about 7-8 years ago. So people haven't really, seen that rawness and that energy in a while.
Yeah.
So,
sorry.
some
Pick
people
up Charlie
might.
Brown.
Nice. So some people might
sound from New York.
Boom. People might be a little taken aback by the whole killer sound, violence kind of aspect of it. What do you have to say about that? Because a lot of people think reggae, peace, love, this, that. But then there's this element of reggae, and a lot of people get a little shocked by it. So how does it kind of managed to coexist not managed to coexist? How is it such a big part of reggae, even though the overall feeling and positive message of reggae might not be immediately what people hear when they hear dub plates?
All right. Well, one, I mean, reggae has never been about like peace and love. That's just a fallacy. I mean, from the start, reggae was had gun tunes, it had pussy tunes, it had every kind of aspect of music, and it's just it's a political music. It's a music built out of poverty. So the whole like, hey, easy, mellow man, it's reggae, like that's a hippie fantasy and not really what the music is about. And when it comes to tunes about sound clash culture and competitiveness and killing, or in terms of Jamaican tunes about guns, I always say to people who don't like that aspect, like, did you ever read like the Iliad or Homer? Like, culture makes art about violence and about war and about all those things all the time. And if you can turn something violent and something dangerous into something poetic and entertaining and crafted into art, then you're doing something positive in the world. And people have to understand what metaphors are. And Soundclash is a game of metaphors. It's a game, there's no killing in real life. No one's getting murdered on stage. No one's ripping their throat out. They're making metaphors. And a metaphor is the basis for all art form. And if you're playing a tune and saying this dub plate's going to chop off your blood clot head, that means the music is killing you. The music is your loaded 45. The tunes are your bullets, and that's the reality here. And I think that people who don't understand that, or it makes them nervous, they have to really think about why that makes them nervous. Why they can go watch a movie with violence or karate chopping. They know that no one's getting killed on that movie theater stage, and they have to understand what art is then, and they have to open up their minds that like everything else beautiful in life, there's contradictions.
Absolutely, I think that's exactly it. Well said. Because I mean, at the end of it, like two sounds might clash, but after that, they might go play each other's dances.
They're shaking hands backstage.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, not to say sometimes there's some bad blood, for sure. But at the end of it, they bury the hatchet, and I mean, for sure, definitely. Okay, I think I just maybe last kind of thing that I'd like to pose to you is having met so many different sound men and women from around the world, and having lived in now Japan, New York, heard a lot of big sounds. I mean, let's just talk a little bit about the global appeal of Soundclash, and how, in your experience, you've seen sounds, deliver differently. Like, for example, the Japanese sounds, or the European sounds, or the New York sounds, or the Jamaican, Indian, Californian. I mean, maybe you can just tell us a little bit about, in your experience, what has been maybe a few sounds that really did something different, that you were like, okay, you talked about supersonic, but maybe out in Japan, you can tell us a sound. I know Ja Works is in this clash. I don't know, maybe just a few sounds that have really kind of...
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I have seen a lot of different sounds, and like, it would be easy to say, that there's a specific Japanese style, or there's a specific European style. To me, there really isn't. What is interesting to me about different sounds, and Ja Works, is a great example of that. Like, I think Ja Works is wicked, and he really loves music, Ja Works. And part of what makes him an interesting sound is he's a cultural sound and a conscious person. And he's really digging deep into the catalog of conscious artists for a very competitive Soundclash-oriented business. So he's not, just playing pure murderation tunes. He's really thinking about what that music means, how it's being spoken, and how to not necessarily go the easy way for a killing tune or for a competitive tune, how to work its way with kind of foundation tunes and a mixture of kind of some roots artists and some roots catalog that people haven't thought of before. And like I said, I think on the European side, there's been a lot of artists that have been kind of rediscovered because a lot of Europeans, for instance, started really being interested, like particle sound, for instance, out of France, like being interested in kind of some more obscure, 80s singers and 70s singers that in Jamaica even people had kind of forgotten about because they weren't they weren't big tunes. And European sounds have been really good at kind of excavating a lot of these artists and re-recording them. I mean, not to go back to Supersonic, but one of the great things, one of their clashes that they won in New York was no one had thought about the great Brooklyn artist Super C in a long time. And they completely won a clash by thinking about Super C's Bad Boy and cutting that as a dub. And they were one of the first sounds that cut that tune again. And for a Brooklyn audience, it was, it was such a revelation to hear that, and the energy that playing that dub, and that I think that could have only come from a European sound that would have had a chance to be outside of New York or outside of Jamaica, and had a chance to kind of create some tunes on their own in their own reflection and look at catalog in a different way. And as Deadly Dragon, we've always sold records and had the ability to have so much not great music at our fingertips, but also so many great customers. So, we learned so much from someone like Jawai's Tipitone sound. The tunes that he appreciated, or some weird guy who only collected tunes from, 1986. That was his own, only year, that we started to be able to see all these different years and what the big tunes were and what a lot of people wouldn't know. So I think for a lot of sound operators that would come through the store, we were able to kind of help them out with different ideas, like, oh, this would be a wicked tune to cut or to consider, or this rhythm, no one's been cutting this. And that was fun for me, just as, as someone around, to kind of be able to help out that kind of Soundclash culture by kind of reintroducing some tunes that people didn't know, and to kind of give our input. And both Jason, who operates at the Deadly Dragon store now, and the website, it excited us to kind of be able to have some input that way into the world culture, and to always support Japanese sounds, Red Spider, and all these people in New York. Because to me, I really couldn't care less where people come from. It's all one culture, and
Sure.
And it's an important culture.
Well, I guess the thing is, like, if you're, wherever you're from shapes the way you look at music, and also the way you interpret reggae music. I know,
Yeah.
for like you're saying, a lot of the European sounds are really into those 80s singers from that digital era. Mighty
Yeah.
Crown, you can see where their tastes lie musically. I mean, someone
Absolutely,
like,
and understanding foundation. If I could bring up one thing, though, that is that, I think that, there's a lot of confusion sometimes, because in Europe, when you talk about sound system and sound clash, a lot of people see it more as a kind of, in some ways, as like kind of modern bass culture. And so, I always had trouble when, some European kind of sound systems that weren't Soundclash would say, like, oh, New York has no sound systems. And you'd be like, what are you talking about? Here's Downbeat. Here's, and they would be like, well, Downbeat's, actual sound system, his rig, and you're like, they were all there. You're getting two things confused. And I think it's good for people to understand that sound systems, regardless if they were Clash sounds or, they're Josh Shaka, that they're all one family. They're all one thing. And that's an important thing. And it has its roots in Jamaica. And, it's not about just, how low frequencies you're providing on your,
For
giant
sure.
things. It's a combination of tunes, artists, engineers, mixers, everything comes into play.
Definitely. I mean, it's a whole culture. You cannot separate one thing from the other. You know, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, yeah, for sure.
It just there was one sound that came to New York that we did something with, and I won't mention who they are, but they said like, oh, you know, New York doesn't have any sound system, and I was standing with Jawai's Tipitone, who's had a sound since since 1965, and Downbeat and all these sound system operators, and they all kind of looked up like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? It was so disrespectful and crazy, and gave no knowledge about what New York is.
Well, I guess kind of what happened, I presume what's happened over the years is that European sort of dub reggae scene has developed into its own thing. So the kids growing up, with that as their reference to sound system, perhaps don't understand Clash at all, or don't understand the roots of Jamaican sound system, because their reference is that European sort of scene.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
that to me is a shame, because they owe it to the culture that they claim to love to understand the history.
Absolutely.
And I mean, there is a real issue, and I can understand people's confusion, saying like, what is a sound system if it doesn't have its own sound system? and that is confusing. And I think in a lot of ways the ability to not have sound system has led to a general decay overall of sound quality coming out of Japan, coming out of Jamaica. I do hope to see a world where everyone does build their own sound systems and revives wonderful sound all over the world. Better than having virus all over the world. Let's have some fucking tunes.
Amen to that, bro. Amen to that. Definitely agree with you. All right. Well, I think it's been a great chat. I mean, is there anything else you kind of want to add?
Thank you for having me. Yeah. Enjoy the clash. Bless up.
Oh, yeah. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Jamaica? We have no idea in India what Jamaica is about. What can we expect from him?
I don't know. He'll get him on the line. He'll give you his own vibes.
Wicked. All right. Cool. Nice one, Jeremy. Thanks a lot for checking in, and we'll see you on Sunday evening at the Clash.
You got it. Bless up.
All right. Well, folks, there you have it. Deadly Dragon not revealing a damn thing about Jamaica. All right, guys, that was Deadly Dragon Sound. Jeremy, big up yourself each and every time. If you guys don't know Deadly Dragon, you need to check out Deadly Dragon. They have a huge presence in reggae music in New York City, all over the world. They have a huge collection of vinyl. They actually sell vinyl. They used to have a shop. Now they do it online. If you're a vinyl collector, a vinyl enthusiast, you need to check them out. It's the store where I bought a lot of my first vinyl, where Reggae Rajahs as a crew bought a lot of our first vinyl. We used to keep going back there many summers in a row to pick up vinyl and bring back to India. So if you love vinyl, check out Deadly Dragon Sound, representing the culture properly. Any questions? Shoot, we got a few minutes. Big up the whole crew who tuned in right now. Reggae India, T-Bone Steaks, Dr. Dub, Skanking Star, Sanyas in the place, D2, Locked and Loaded, Bass Maya still there. Yeah, man. So if you guys have any questions at all, let me know. World Quarantine Clash tomorrow. Viraj Berganza, big up yourself each and every time. World Quarantine Clash 2020 starts tomorrow. Delhi Sultanate, Bass Foundation Roots against Jamaica One from California. That is at 12:30 tomorrow night, which means basically Monday morning, but tomorrow night, 12:30. We are the first Clash, India representing on the first Clash. And then after that is our good friend Cheeky Dubs. Yeah, man. Cheeky Dubs against Irie Crew from France. So it's exciting, super exciting. Quarantine Clash is what we're leading up to. Thank you guys so much. If there are no questions, I guess we will check out at this point. Thank you guys for tuning in from all over. We'll see you tomorrow night. Major Lazer YouTube channel, 12:30. Yeah, man. Big up yourselves. Soundclash 101. Big up Box Out FM. Reggae Rajahs in the place. Big up the whole crew. Yes, Deadly Dragon. Thank you very much for checking in with us. Shout out to Major Lazer, Walshy Fire, Mataya, Warrior Sound. We locked and we loaded. Good night. See you guys tomorrow. Boom bam.